Spiritual awakening begins when you get tired of running away from yourself. Have you ever noticed how much energy we spend running away from ourselves? The endless distractions, the constant noise, the frantic activity, all designed to keep us from facing what lies within. But what if I told you that spiritual awakening doesn't begin with some profound mystical experience or decades of meditation? What if it begins in that quiet moment when you finally admit, I'm exhausted from running away from myself? Welcome to today's exploration of one of life's most transformative journeys, the path of spiritual awakening that begins precisely when our strategies of self-avoidance collapse. Over the next 25 minutes, we'll dive deep into the science of meditation, the psychology of inner escape, and the profound transformation that occurs when we finally turn toward what we've been avoiding. By the end of this video, you'll understand why spiritual awakening isn't about adding something new to your life, but rather about stopping the exhausting process of fleeing from yourself. Whether you're already on a spiritual path, feeling the first stirrings of awakening, or simply tired of running, this exploration might just be the permission you need to finally come home to yourself. The exhaustion of running. Why we flee from ourselves. Look around, and you'll see a world perfectly engineered for escape. Endless scrolling on social media, binge-watching entire seasons in a single sitting, compulsive shopping, work that never ends, even productive distractions like excessive exercise or perfectionism. Our modern world offers infinite ways to avoid the quiet space where we might encounter ourselves. But why? Why do we invest so much energy fleeing from our own interior landscape? The answer lies in what Buddhist psychology calls dukkha, the inherent unsatisfactoriness that accompanies human experience. We run because facing ourselves means confronting uncomfortable truths, our pain, our mortality, our mistakes, our unfulfilled longings, our fundamental aloneness in the universe. Neuroscience offers fascinating insights into this avoidance pattern. Research shows that when left unstimulated, the default mode network in our brains naturally activates, triggering self-referential thinking, reflections on our identity, past experiences, and existential questions. For many people, this quieting triggers anxiety, which then drives them toward distraction to silence the discomfort. What's particularly interesting is that this pattern of avoidance requires tremendous energy to maintain. Each time uncomfortable feelings or thoughts arise, the brain must quickly redirect attention elsewhere, activating stress response systems that, over time, deplete our physical and psychological resources. Studies show that chronic avoidance correlates with higher levels of cortisol, inflammation markers, and decreased immune function. Our bodies literally wear down from the effort of running from ourselves. Perhaps most telling is what happens when people finally exhaust their capacity for avoidance. Often following a crisis, illness, or major life disruption, people report a surrender that feels simultaneously like defeat and relief. I couldn't keep running anymore, they say. Or, something in me finally gave up. This point of exhaustion, when the strategies of avoidance no longer work, often marks the true beginning of spiritual awakening, the moment of reckoning, when avoidance no longer works. Every spiritual tradition describes a critical turning point that initiates authentic awakening. In Buddhism, it's often called entering the stream. Christian mystics speak of the dark night of the soul. Hindu traditions reference the call to awakening. Across these diverse perspectives runs a common thread, a moment when the strategies that once helped us avoid ourselves suddenly lose their effectiveness. This moment rarely feels blissful or transcendent. More often, it arrives through crisis, a health breakdown, relationship collapse, professional failure, or existential depression. These situations strip away our carefully constructed defenses, forcing us to confront what we've been avoiding, sometimes for decades. Research in trauma psychology offers interesting parallels to this spiritual concept. Dr. Gabor Mate's work shows that many addictions, whether to substances, work, or even spiritual bypassing, function as adaptations to underlying pain. When these adaptations fail, we face what he calls the realm of hungry ghosts, the unmet needs and unhealed wounds we've been fleeing from. What's particularly notable about this reckoning moment is that it often appears as failure rather than spiritual breakthrough. The person doesn't experience immediate enlightenment, but rather the painful collapse of their avoidance strategies. They feel not transcendent but broken, Yet this very brokenness creates an opening that wasn't previously available. Contemplative neuroscience research confirms this paradox. Brain imaging studies of long-term meditators show that what might appear externally as giving up actually represents a profound neural shift, from dominant activation in the brain's doing network, task-oriented, goal-directed, to its being network, present moment awareness, direct experience. This shift doesn't add something new, but rather releases the exhausting effort of constant avoidance. This helps explain why genuine spiritual awakening often begins not with achievement, but with surrender, not with gaining something new, but with stopping the exhausting process of running away. The courage to turn inward, facing what we've been avoiding. When avoidance strategies collapse, we face a crucial choice: find new distractions or finally turn toward what we've been fleeing. This turning inward, what contemplative traditions call the practice of presence, requires a particular kind of courage. Not the dramatic courage of heroic action, but the quiet bravery of remaining still while facing our internal landscape. What makes this turn so challenging is that we must confront precisely what our avoidance patterns were designed to protect us from. For some, it's unprocessed trauma, memories and emotions too overwhelming to face earlier in life. For others, it's existential questions about mortality, meaning, or purpose. For many, it's simply the raw vulnerability of being fully present to life without buffers or escape hatches. Research in mindfulness psychology shows that this turning toward difficulty, what's sometimes called invitational presence, activates very different neural pathways than avoidance. While avoidance triggers stress responses associated with threat, present moment attention to difficult experiences, when done with self-compassion, activates regulatory systems associated with safety and social connection. This shift from avoidance to presence isn't a one-time event, but rather a practice, what Buddhist tradition calls returning to the breath 1,000 times. Each time we notice ourselves fleeing into distraction and gently guide attention back to present experience, we strengthen neural pathways associated with awareness and weaken those associated with automatic avoidance. What many find surprising is that what awaits them in this inner landscape is rarely as terrifying as imagined. Yes, there may be pain, grief, or fear, but these emotions, when finally allowed into awareness without resistance, often transform more readily than when held at bay. As one meditation teacher puts it, the only way out is through. This willingness to face what we've been avoiding creates the foundation for authentic spiritual awakening, not as an escape from reality, but as a profound engagement with it. Meditation, the art of staying with yourself. While spiritual awakening can begin spontaneously through crisis or surrender, meditation offers a more intentional pathway into this territory. Contrary to popular misconception, meditation isn't primarily about achieving blissful states or emptying the mind. At its core, it's a practice of remaining present as we encounter ourselves exactly as we are. Different meditation traditions approach this practice through various techniques. Mindfulness traditions emphasize non-judgmental awareness of present experience, noticing thoughts, emotions, and sensations as they arise without getting caught in them. Concentration practices develop the capacity to maintain focused attention despite distractions. Self-inquiry traditions directly investigate the nature of self through questions like, "Who am I?" or "What is aware of this experience?" What unites these approaches is their common function: interrupting our habitual patterns of avoidance and strengthening our capacity to remain present even when uncomfortable. Research in contemplative neuroscience confirms this effect, showing that regular meditation practice reduces activity in brain regions associated with mind-wandering and self-referential thinking, the default mode network, while increasing activity in regions associated with present moment awareness and attention regulation. For beginners, meditation often reveals just how powerful our avoidance habits are. The mind constantly seeks escape, planning future activities, rehashing past events, generating random thoughts, anything to avoid simply being here now. This restlessness isn't a failure of meditation, but rather its first important insight. Seeing clearly how persistently we flee from ourselves. As practice deepens, something remarkable happens. Moments arise when we stop running and simply rest in awareness itself. These aren't necessarily dramatic mystical states, but rather brief experiences of being fully present without the usual effort of avoiding, seeking, or becoming something else. Buddhist teacher Ajahn Chah described this as the peace of not wanting to be elsewhere. Research confirms the physiological signatures of these states: decreased stress hormones, increased heart rate variability, a marker of autonomic nervous system balance, and synchronization of brainwaves associated with integrated function. The body literally shifts from emergency mode to restful presence. What makes meditation such a powerful vehicle for spiritual awakening isn't that it adds something new to us, but rather that it gradually unwinds our habitual patterns of escape, allowing us to discover what has always been present beneath our strategies of avoidance. Beyond spiritual bypassing, the awakening that includes everything. One of the greatest misconceptions about spiritual awakening is that it eliminates suffering or difficult emotions. This misunderstanding leads to what psychologists call spiritual bypassing, using spiritual practices or beliefs to avoid rather than engage with challenging psychological material. True awakening moves in precisely the opposite direction. Rather than creating a new form of escape, it develops our capacity to remain present with the full spectrum of human experience, including the parts we've been running from. As Buddhist teacher Jack Kornfield puts it, no amount of meditation or prayer makes our vulnerability disappear. Research in contemplative psychotherapy supports this understanding, showing that advanced meditators don't experience fewer difficult emotions than non-meditators. The difference lies in their relationship to these emotions. They can hold painful feelings in awareness without being overwhelmed or defined by them. This capacity, what psychologists call decentering, allows for being with difficulty without becoming it. This distinction helps explain why some spiritual practices can initially increase discomfort rather than reduce it. As avoidance patterns weaken, previously suppressed material often emerges into consciousness, what meditation teachers sometimes call purification. Emotions, memories, or sensations that have been held at bay through distraction suddenly appear in awareness, creating what can feel like regression rather than progress. Understanding this phase is crucial for sustainable practice. Many people abandon meditation when it starts working at deeper levels, mistaking the emergence of suppressed material for failure rather than necessary integration. Proper context and support during these passages, whether through teachers, community, or therapeutic resources, can make the difference between abandonment and breakthrough. What emerges beyond spiritual bypassing is not a state free from difficulty, but rather a profound shift in our relationship to all experience. Joy is no longer dependent on pleasant circumstances. Peace doesn't require the absence of challenge. Instead, awareness itself becomes an unconditional space that can hold everything: pain and pleasure, grief and joy, birth and death, without fragmentation or escape. The dark night, when awakening feels like falling apart. What many spiritual traditions acknowledge, but popular spirituality often glosses over, is that authentic awakening frequently includes periods of profound disorientation and suffering. These passages, which Christian mystic Saint John of the Cross called the dark night of the soul, represent not failure on the path but necessary stages of transformation. During these periods, practitioners often report feeling lost, disconnected from previous sources of meaning, and abandoned by the very spiritual insights that once brought comfort. The Buddhist meditation maps describe stages like the knowledge of suffering, the knowledge of dissolution, and the knowledge of fear, phases where the meditator directly experiences the instability and unsatisfactoriness of all phenomena, including their sense of self. Research in transformative experience psychology offers valuable context for these difficult passages. Studies show that profound personal transformation typically includes a liminal phase, a disorienting threshold where old identities and meaning structures dissolve before new ones coalesce. This creates a developmental space that feels simultaneously like breakdown and breakthrough. Neuroscientifically, these periods often correspond with reorganization in brain networks associated with self-reference and meaning-making. As meditation practice dismantles habitual patterns of identity and narrative, the brain undergoes a literal restructuring, what neuroscientists call self-transformation through self-deconstruction. This process can temporarily disrupt our sense of coherence and belonging in the world. What makes these passages particularly challenging is that they're often misdiagnosed by the practitioner, and sometimes even by teachers, as regression or pathology rather than transformation. Without proper context, the meditator may abandon practice precisely when deeper levels of awakening are becoming available. Or, equally problematic, they might pathologize natural aspects of the awakening process, seeking psychological or psychiatric interventions for what are actually transpersonal developmental stages. This highlights the crucial importance of what contemplative traditions call right view, an accurate conceptual understanding of the path that can orient the practitioner during difficult passages. When we understand that disintegration often precedes reintegration at higher levels of organization, we can meet these experiences with greater trust and patience, returning to life, awakening as embodied presence. The culmination of spiritual awakening isn't escape from the world, but rather full embodied presence within it. This represents a profound paradox. We begin the journey seeking relief from suffering, only to discover that awakening means opening fully to life exactly as it is, including its inevitable pain and loss. Advanced stages of contemplative development show a characteristic pattern across traditions. The practitioner moves from absorption in transcendent states to what Zen describes as returning to the marketplace with gift-bestowing hands. Rather than remaining in detached awareness, the awakened perspective finds expression through engaged action in the world. Research in post-conventional development psychology shows similar patterns. Studies of individuals exhibiting highly developed awareness consistently find an integration of seemingly opposite qualities. They combine contemplative detachment with passionate engagement, spiritual transcendence with practical effectiveness, and individual autonomy with deep relational connection. Neuroimaging studies of long-term meditators reveal corresponding patterns in the brain. Increased integration between networks associated with focused attention, open awareness, emotional processing, and executive function. Rather than emphasizing one cognitive mode at the expense of others, the contemplative brain shows greater flexibility and coherence across diverse neural systems. This integration explains why mature spiritual practitioners often appear simultaneously more ordinary and more extraordinary than expected. They may lack the dramatic spiritual experiences or special powers sometimes associated with awakening, while demonstrating unusual levels of presence, compassion, and effectiveness in everyday situations. The Zen saying captures this quality perfectly. Before enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. The difference lies not in what is done, but in how it is done, with full presence rather than divided attention, with complete engagement rather than partial avoidance. This return to ordinary life represents not a compromise or lessening of awakening, but its genuine fulfillment, the capacity to be fully present with whatever arises, pleasant or painful, magnificent or mundane, becomes the ultimate expression of freedom. Practical takeaways. Now that we've explored the deeper dimensions of spiritual awakening, let's focus on practical approaches you can implement immediately to begin or deepen your own journey of turning toward yourself. First, establish a coming home practice for daily reconnection with your inner life. Set aside just 5 to 10 minutes each day to sit in silence without distractions. Don't try to achieve any particular state or outcome. Simply notice what arises when you stop running. Research shows that even this minimal practice reduces default mode network activity associated with mind wandering and increases neural integration associated with presence. The key is consistency rather than duration. Second, implement the distraction inventory to become aware of your personal avoidance patterns. For 3 days, keep a small notebook with you and make a quick note each time you reach for distraction. Whether digital devices, food, work, or any activity that functions as escape rather than genuine rest or engagement. Don't judge these patterns. Simply acknowledge them with curiosity. Studies show that this awareness practice alone can reduce compulsive behavior by up to 30% within a week. Third, practice the RAIN technique when facing difficult emotions, a 4-step process developed by meditation teacher Tara Brach. Recognize what's happening. I'm feeling anxious. Allow the experience to be there without trying to change it. Investigate with kind attention how it feels in your body, and nurture yourself with self-compassion. Research in effective neuroscience shows that this approach activates regulatory brain regions that help process emotion without suppression or amplification. Fourth, incorporate micro moments of presence throughout your day. Set an hourly reminder on your phone or computer, and when it sounds, pause for just 3 conscious breaths, feeling the sensations of breathing while fully present in your body. These brief returns to embodied awareness interrupt the momentum of avoidance and strengthen neural pathways associated with presence. Studies show that this practice significantly reduces stress hormones and improves attention regulation. Finally, Adopt the sacred pause before reaching for your phone or other distractions. When you feel the urge to check notifications or scroll social media, pause for just 5 seconds and ask, what am I feeling right now that I'm trying to escape from? This brief moment of honest inquiry creates space between impulse and action, gradually weakening automatic avoidance patterns. Research on habit formation shows that this simple interruption can reduce compulsive technology use by over 40% within 2 weeks. Remember, spiritual awakening isn't about perfecting these practices or achieving special states. It's about gradually developing the capacity to stay present with yourself, exactly as you are in this moment, without the exhausting effort of running away. Each time you practice turning toward rather than away from your experience, you strengthen the very awareness that is the foundation of genuine awakening. As we come to the end of our exploration, perhaps the most profound insight about spiritual awakening is also the simplest. The treasure you've been seeking has been within you all along, waiting patiently beneath the noise of avoidance and distraction. The spiritual journey isn't about becoming something other than what you are. It's about the courage to finally stop running, to turn and face what you've been avoiding, only to discover that the monsters you feared were shadows, and the emptiness you dreaded contains the very fullness you've been seeking elsewhere. True awakening doesn't require special abilities or years of retreat in mountain caves. It begins in that honest moment when you acknowledge your exhaustion from running away from yourself. It deepens each time you choose presence over distraction, awareness over avoidance, being over endless doing. I'm curious, what have you discovered when you've stopped running and turned toward your inner experience? What insights or challenges have emerged in those moments of genuine presence? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your vulnerability might be exactly what another viewer needs to find courage for their own journey inward. If this exploration resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more insights integrating ancient wisdom with modern research to support your path of awakening. Next week, we'll explore specific meditation practices designed to develop stable awareness during emotional intensity, a crucial capacity for sustainable awakening. Until then, remember, the most radical act of spiritual awakening isn't seeking extraordinary experiences, but rather bringing full presence to your ordinary life, exactly as it is, exactly as you are. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single breath, fully felt. The information presented on this channel is for informational and educational purposes only, and does not replace professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult a doctor or a qualified healthcare professional for any concerns about your health. If you are experiencing health issues, seek medical assistance immediately. Never ignore symptoms or delay seeking medical care based on information found online. Taking care of your health is essential. Schedule regular checkups with your doctor and follow medical advice tailored to your condition.